When I returned from my 3-day strategy meeting in Lisbon, I expected the familiar chaos of my engineering team. Keyboards clacking, heated debates over code, the aroma of burnt coffee. Instead, I found suffocating silence and dust-covered spaces where desks once stood. They'd been banished to the moldy basement to make room for my boss's golden hire, but he had no idea that in that moment, I'd already begun orchestrating the complete demolition of his grand performance. My name is Amelia Rowe, and I've spent 6 years building the systems engineering team at Brightforge Dynamics from the ground up. At 36, I'd earned my stripes through countless late nights, impossible deadlines, and the kind of technical challenges that make most engineers break out in cold sweats. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared me for what I discovered that humid Tuesday morning in September. The elevator doors opened to the 7th floor, and immediately, something felt wrong. The usual morning symphony was missing. No arguments about Python versus Java, no mechanical keyboards creating their distinctive percussion. No one debating the merits of the latest framework over terrible break-room coffee. I wheeled my carry-on past reception, my heels clicking against the polished floor with an echo that shouldn't exist in a space housing 7 brilliant engineers. When I rounded the corner to our pod, my stomach dropped, empty, completely, utterly empty. Not just the people, the desks, the monitors, the whiteboards covered in architectural diagrams I'd left 3 days ago. Even the dying succulent Jake insisted on watering with energy drinks was gone. Only the ghost marks on the carpet remained, rectangular imprints where furniture had lived for years. Amelia? Marcus from finance stood behind me, his expression caught between sympathy and second-hand embarrassment. Benton moved your team yesterday. Moved? I kept my voice level, though my pulse hammered. Where exactly did Harold Benton move my team? Marcus shifted his weight, adjusting his glasses, a tell I'd learned meant bad news incoming. The technical storage area, B2. B2, the basement. The fucking basement where we kept decommissioned servers and boxes of outdated manuals. I didn't run. Running would show weakness. And I'd learned long ago that in corporate warfare, perception was ammunition. But I walked fast enough that Marcus had to jog to keep up as I headed for the service elevator. He said it was temporary, Marcus offered weakly, just until the new spatial efficiency plan. Marcus! I stopped, turned, and gave him the smile I reserved for vendors who tried to overcharge us. We both know nothing labeled temporary in this company ever is. The service elevator smelled like industrial cleaner and broken dreams. When it opened to B2, the fluorescent lights flickered like a horror movie cliché. The hallway stretched ahead, painted that specific shade of beige that screamed, "We gave up trying." I heard them before I saw them, muffled voices behind a door marked Technical Storage 2B. I pushed it open. My team sat crammed around a conference table meant for 4. Laptops balanced precariously on their knees. Extension cords snaked across the floor like trip hazards waiting to happen. In the corner, a bucket caught steady drops from a ceiling pipe, each plink a metallic reminder of how far we'd fallen. 7 faces turned to me. 7 brilliant minds I'd handpicked, mentored, and protected through every corporate restructuring and budget cut. Now they sat in a basement that reeked of mildew and defeat. Boss. Sarah, my lead developer, stood first. Her usual pristine appearance was already wilting in the humidity. We tried calling, but... I know. I surveyed the space, cataloging every violation of basic workplace standards. The ventilation alone would fail any inspection. Everyone doing okay? They exchanged glances, the kind that said everything without words. Tom, barely 25 but capable of coding circles around developers twice his age, spoke up. They moved us while you were gone. Came in Monday morning, security was already boxing up our stuff. Said Mr. Benton needed the space for strategic initiatives. Strategic initiatives, I repeated, tasting the corporate bullshit on my tongue. And did anyone explain what initiatives required displacing the team responsible for 78% of our technical infrastructure? Oh, we met him. Linda, my database architect, couldn't hide her disgust. Victor Lane, Benton's new productivity transformation specialist. He actually asked if we were the interns when we tried to get our equipment from upstairs. Victor Lane, I filed the name away, already imagining how it would look on a resignation letter, though not mine. He's got some impressive resume, Jake added, sarcasm dripping from every word. Apparently revolutionized 3 companies. Benton couldn't stop talking about his innovative workspace optimization theories. I pulled out a folding chair that squeaked in protest and sat down with my team. 7 people who'd helped me build something extraordinary, now breathing moldy air and working under lights that belonged in an interrogation room. All right, I said, meeting each of their eyes. I need everyone to listen very carefully. We're going to play this smart. As of right now, I want complete documentation of every project, every system, every piece of code you've written, personal backups, encrypted, offsite storage. Can you do that quietly? They nodded, and I saw something shift in their expressions. Not hope exactly, but something sharper. Trust? Maybe. Or recognition that I wasn't going to let this stand. Boss, Sarah asked quietly, what are you planning? I thought about the email I'd ignored from Sophie Drake at Vertex Innovations, asking if I was happy at Brightforge. I thought about Harold Benton's smug face when he'd hired me, promising autonomy and respect for technical expertise. I thought about Victor Lane, sitting in my office right now, probably hanging his worthless certificates on my walls. I'm planning to show them exactly what happens when you put your best assets in the basement, I said, standing. But first, I need to meet our new strategic initiative, Sarah. You're in charge until I get back. Document everything, every leak, every code violation, every safety hazard, take photos. As I walked back to the elevator, their whispers followed me. They knew me well enough to recognize the calm before my particular brand of storm. Harold Benton had just made the kind of mistake that case studies would someday analyze in business schools. He'd underestimated Amelia Rowe. The executive floor hadn't changed in my absence. Same pristine marble, same abstract art that cost more than my team's quarterly budget. Same assistants who smiled without ever making eye contact. But my office, the corner space I'd earned through 6 years of flawless system implementations, now bore a gleaming new nameplate. Victor Lane, Chief Productivity Transformation Officer. I didn't knock. Victor sat behind my desk, my grandfather's restored oak desk that I'd brought from home, arranging a collection of framed certificates across the surface like playing cards. He looked up with the kind of smile that belonged on a real estate billboard. Too white, too wide, too practiced. Can I help you? He didn't stand, didn't extend a hand, just leaned back in my chair with the casual authority of someone who'd never earned anything the hard way. I'm Amelia Rowe. This was my office until yesterday. Oh, the engineering manager. He said it like he'd just remembered where he'd left his keys. Harold mentioned you were traveling. Great timing, actually, made the transition much smoother. I stepped closer, noting the motivational posters he'd already hung. Success is a journey, not a destination. Synergy. Together everyone achieves more. The kind of corporate propaganda that made actual professionals want to punch walls. I noticed my team has been relocated, I said, maintaining the kind of calm that preceded natural disasters. Spatial optimization, Victor replied, gesturing at a diagram on his screen. Your team was utilizing premium real estate for purely technical work. My analysis showed a 30% efficiency gain by moving non-client-facing departments to alternative spaces. Alternative spaces? You mean the basement with the leaking pipes and mold problem? He waved dismissively. Temporary accommodation while we implement the full transformation. Though frankly, I've found that engineers actually prefer isolated environments. Less distraction, more focus on core competencies. I studied him, mid-40s, soft around the edges, with the kind of tan that came from golf courses, not actual work. His resume, prominently displayed in a gold frame, listed 3 companies I recognized. 2 had filed for bankruptcy within a year of his departure. The third had survived only through a massive bailout. And Harold approved this transformation. Harold understands vision, Victor said, finally standing. He was shorter than me in my heels, and I enjoyed watching him realize it. He knows that sometimes you need to break a few eggs to make an omelet. Your team's work is important, sure, but it's not exactly growth driving, is it? Maintenance, updates, keeping the lights on, necessary, but not transformative. Behind him, through my former window, I could see the city stretching out beneath gray September clouds. I'd watched 100 sunsets from this spot while my team and I rebuilt Brightforge's entire infrastructure from scratch, creating systems that had prevented 3 major security breaches and saved the company $12 million last year alone. You're right, I said, and watched surprise flicker across his face. We just keep the lights on. Speaking of which, did Harold mention that our quarterly board presentation is next week? The board? Victor's smile faltered slightly. That's actually perfect timing. Harold wants me to present my productivity roadmap, show them the future of Brightforge. Interesting. The board specifically requested a technical infrastructure review. Elena Cross herself asked for it. You know Elena, right? Our CEO, she has that MIT computer science degree and tends to ask very specific questions about system architecture. The color drained from Victor's face just a shade. I'm sure Harold will brief me on any technical details I need. I'm sure he will. I turned to leave, then paused. Oh, Victor? Those certificates, the one from Strategic Excellence Institute. My nephew got one of those last summer. He's 12. They were running a special, buy one, get one free. I didn't wait for his response, but I heard the sharp intake of breath, the squeak of my chair as he sat down hard. In the elevator, I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Harold Benton's number. He answered on the second ring, his voice carrying that artificial warmth of middle managers who'd read too many leadership books. Amelia, how was Lisbon? I hope you don't mind the temporary relocation. Victor needed to hit the ground running. And, Harold, I just wanted to confirm, you want Victor handling the board presentation next week? Absolutely. He's got fantastic ideas about repositioning our technical operations as a profit center rather than a cost burden. The board will love it. And you're confident he can handle Elena's technical questions. You remember what happened to the last person who tried to bullshit her about system capabilities? A pause. Robert Hutchins had been fired mid-presentation when he couldn't explain basic database architecture. Victor's credentials speak for themselves, Harold said, but uncertainty crept into his voice. He's transformed 3 major corporations. Of course, I just wanted to make sure my team provides whatever support you need. From the basement. It's temporary, Amelia. A few weeks at most. Victor just needs to establish his methodology, show some quick wins. You understand, right? Sometimes leadership requires difficult decisions. I understand perfectly, I said as the elevator opened to the basement level. In fact, I'm documenting everything for clarity. For the record. Good. Good. Transparency is key. Listen, I have to run. But let's catch up soon, okay? Maybe lunch next week? After the board meeting, I suggested. I have a feeling our schedules will be much clearer then. I ended the call and walked back to Technical Storage 2B. My team looked up as I entered, and I saw the questions in their eyes. How bad? Sarah asked. Victor Lane is presenting our technical infrastructure review to the board next week. He thinks we're a cost burden that needs transforming. Tom laughed, sharp and disbelieving. He's presenting our systems? Can he even spell load balancer? Doubtful, I said, pulling out my laptop. Which is why we're going to prepare the most comprehensive technical documentation this company has ever seen. Every system, every integration, every custom solution we've built. But here's the key. We label everything with maximum technical specificity. No layman's terms, no simplified explanations. Linda's eyes lit up with understanding. So when Elena asks him to explain our distributed caching strategy, he'll have our documentation, I said, smiling for the first time since I'd returned. Every beautiful, complex, technically accurate detail. and not a single clue what any of it means. The bucket in the corner continued its steady plink, plink, plink. But now it sounded less like defeat and more like a countdown. The basement became our war room. While Victor paraded around upstairs in my office, conducting visibility sessions and synergy workshops, we worked in focused silence, broken only by the steady drip of water and the hum of overtaxed laptops. "Boss, you need to see this." Jake called out on Thursday morning, his screen showing a LinkedIn notification. Victor's already updating his profile, currently transforming Brightforge Dynamics into a next-generation productivity powerhouse. "Let him," I said, reviewing the documentation Sarah had compiled. "Pride comes before a fall. And his is scheduled for Tuesday at 2 p.m. My team had outdone themselves. What we'd created wasn't just documentation, it was a masterpiece of malicious compliance. Every system was explained in excruciating technical detail, with nested dependencies mapped out like a subway system designed by M.C. Escher. It was completely accurate, thoroughly comprehensive, and utterly incomprehensible to anyone who hadn't spent years building it. "Remember," I addressed the team, "we're not sabotaging anything. We're being thoroughly professional. If Victor wants to present our infrastructure, we're giving him everything he needs to do so." "Everything and more," Tom muttered, adding another layer of complexity to his network topology diagram. Linda had been quiet all morning, working on something separate from the documentation. Finally, she looked up. "Amelia, I've been tracking our actual metrics. Do you know our uptime for the last 18 months? 99. 97%. I replied without hesitation. 99.98%, actually. And the industry standard for companies our size is 99.5%. We're also running at 60% of the standard operational cost." She turned her laptop toward me. "I've been keeping private records since that budget meeting last year when Harold questioned our value." I studied her data. It was beautiful, clean, irrefutable proof that my team wasn't just competent, we were exceptional. "Send that to my personal email. Encrypted." Already done. That afternoon, I had an unexpected visitor. Elena Cross herself appeared in our basement dungeon, her Louboutins clicking against the concrete floor with obvious distaste. The CEO of Brightforge Dynamics didn't often venture below the executive floors, and never to the basement. "Amelia," she said, taking in the deplorable conditions with sharp eyes. "I heard you were back." "Elena," I stood, noting how my team tried to look busy while hanging on every word. "I'd offer you a seat, but as you can see, we're operating with limited resources." She examined the leaking pipe, the flickering lights, the extension cords creating an OSHA violation obstacle course. "Harold's idea?" Victor Lane's spatial optimization. Harold approved it. "Victor Lane." She said the name like she was tasting something sour. "Harold's been singing his praises all week. Apparently, we're about to become a case study in transformation excellence." "That's what I hear." Elena stepped closer, lowering her voice. "The board meeting on Tuesday. Harold insists Victor should present the technical review. Says it will show fresh perspective." "And you're allowing it?" A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "I believe in giving people enough rope. Question is, what will they do with it?" She turned to leave, then paused. "Amelia, you've been maintaining external backups of our critical systems documentation, haven't you? Industry best practice and all. Of course. Updated weekly, stored off-site, encrypted to federal standards." "Good." She picked her way through the extension cords. "I'd hate to lose that institutional knowledge if something were to change." After she left, Sarah whistled low. "Was that what I think it was?" "That was the CEO doing her due diligence," I said carefully. "Nothing more." But we all knew better. Elena Cross didn't visit basements unless she was battlefield mapping. That evening, I worked late, ostensibly updating documentation, but actually researching Victor's previous companies. The pattern was always the same. Arrive with fanfare. Implement dramatic changes, collect a bonus, and exit just before the consequences hit. Company number 1 had lost 40% of their technical staff within 3 months of his changes. Company 2 had suffered a catastrophic system failure that cost them 8 figures. Company 3 barely survived, and only because they'd reversed every single one of his initiatives. My phone buzzed. Sophie Drake from Vertex Innovations. Heard through the grapevine you might be unhappy. Coffee tomorrow. Noon at Brewster's. I stared at the message. Sophie and I had worked together on an international banking integration 5 years ago. She'd tried to poach me twice since then. But I'd been loyal to Brightforge, loyal to the team I'd built, loyal to the promise of growth and respect. I looked around the basement, at my brilliant team working under conditions that would make a startup garage look luxurious. "I'll be there," I typed back. "Going somewhere?" Sarah asked, having apparently developed eyes in the back of her head. "Coffee with an old friend tomorrow. I'll be back by 2. An old friend who happens to run technical operations at Vertex? I met her gaze. Maintaining external relationships is just good business practice. Sarah nodded slowly. Speaking of good business practice, did you know Victor requested admin access to our code repositories today? Said he needed to evaluate our technical assets for optimization opportunities. And Tom may have accidentally given him access to our development server instead of production. The one where we test all the experimental features, the really experimental ones, the ones that definitely shouldn't be presented to a board as current infrastructure. That's unfortunate, I said, fighting to keep my expression neutral. I hope no one gets confused. Oh, I'm sure it'll be fine. Tom called out, not looking up from his screen. I mean, what's the worst that could happen? Someone might try to explain our quantum-enhanced neural network load balancer to a room full of executives? We don't have a quantum-enhanced anything, I said. We do on the dev server. It's right there in the documentation. 40 pages of highly technical specifications, very impressive stuff. Completely theoretical. Of course. But Victor won't know that. I should have stopped them. A responsible manager would have insisted on complete honesty and professional integrity. But responsibility had gotten my team banished to a moldy basement while an incompetent charlatan sat in my office. Make sure the real documentation is properly backed up, I said finally. We want to be able to restore accurate information when necessary. The team exchanged glances, and I saw determination replace despair. We weren't just documenting our systems anymore. We were documenting Victor Lane's inevitable downfall. The water continued to drip into the bucket. Plink, plink, plink. 4 days until the board meeting. Tuesday arrived with the kind of crisp autumn morning that made everything seem sharper, more defined. I dressed carefully, my best suit, the one I'd worn when I'd first pitched the infrastructure overhaul to the board 3 years ago. If this was going to be an execution, I'd look the part of the executioner, not the victim. The board meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. At 1:30, I positioned myself in the 7th floor break room, the one with a direct view of the executive conference room. Victor strutted past at 1:45, carrying a leather portfolio and wearing a smile that suggested he'd already spent his bonus. Harold intercepted me as I headed toward the conference room. Amelia, what are you doing here? The meeting is a technical infrastructure review that my team has been preparing for 6 weeks, I said smoothly. I assumed you'd want me available for any clarification questions. That won't be necessary. Victor has everything well in hand. He's been studying your documentation all weekend. Our 40-page quantum-enhanced neural network specifications? Harold's eyes lit up. Groundbreaking stuff. I had no idea your team had been working on something so innovative. Victor's going to showcase it as proof of Brightforge's technical evolution. I maintained my poker face through sheer force of will. Victor's presenting our quantum-enhanced system to the board. It's the centerpiece of his presentation. Shows how we're not just maintaining systems, but pioneering new technologies. How ambitious. The conference room doors opened, and board members began filing in. Elena Cross caught my eye and raised an eyebrow. I gave her the slightest shake of my head. Stay tuned. Actually, Harold, I said, loud enough for the arriving board members to hear. I should attend. The quantum system is highly complex. If anyone has questions about the implementation, Richard Vaughn, the board's technical advisor and former CTO of a Fortune 500 company, stopped mid-stride. Quantum system? Brightforge has quantum computing capabilities? According to Victor's presentation, we do, I said innocently. He's been very thorough in his research. Richard's eyes narrowed. He'd seen enough corporate bullshit to smell it from a distance. Then I definitely want to hear this. Harold couldn't refuse without looking suspicious. Of course, Amelia, why don't you sit in? But let Victor handle the presentation. The conference room filled quickly. 12 board members, all successful executives who'd built their careers on detecting and eliminating incompetence. Elena took her position at the head of the table, her expression carefully neutral. Victor began with confidence, clicking through slides filled with buzzwords and synergy diagrams. For 15 minutes, he coasted on charm and corporate speak. Then Elena interrupted. Victor, let's skip to the technical infrastructure. I'm particularly interested in this quantum-enhanced neural network system. Richard has some expertise in this area. Victor's smile flickered but held. Of course, this is where Brightforge truly shines. He clicked to a slide I recognized, Tom's masterpiece of fictional technology. Our quantum-enhanced neural network load balancer represents a paradigm shift in system optimization. Fascinating. Richard leaned forward. What's your qubit count? Victor consulted his notes. Our notes, filled with technically accurate but completely fictional specifications. We're operating at 2048 qubits with a coherence time of 100 microseconds. Richard's expression didn't change, but I saw his fingers tap the table, his tell for barely contained disbelief. That's impressive. IBM's best quantum computer only maintains coherence for 90 microseconds. How did your team achieve the extra stability? Victor was sweating now. Through proprietary stabilization algorithms. Which algorithms specifically? Elena asked, her MIT education rising to the surface. Surely you can share high-level details with the board. The documentation specifies a hybrid approach. Victor fumbled with pages. Using quantum entanglement principles integrated with classical load balancing. That's literally impossible, Richard said flatly. Quantum and classical systems can't be integrated that way. It violates fundamental physics. The room went silent except for the sound of Victor's papers rustling as he desperately searched for an answer that didn't exist. Perhaps, Elena suggested with dangerous calm. Amelia could clarify, since her team developed this system. All eyes turned to me. This was it, the moment where I could either save Victor and betray my team, or tell the truth and watch him burn. I'd be happy to clarify. I stood, walking to the front of the room. There is no quantum-enhanced neural network load balancer. What Victor has been presenting is documentation from our development server, where we test experimental and theoretical concepts. It's essentially sophisticated technical fiction we use for training scenarios. Victor's face cycled through colors I didn't know humans could achieve. You gave me false documentation? We gave you exactly what you asked for, complete access to our technical assets. You just accessed the wrong server. The production documentation was clearly labeled and available. You chose to present development experiments as reality without verifying with the team that built them. This is sabotage. Harold stood, pointing at me. You deliberately did what? Elena cut him off. Gave complete access as requested, made all documentation available. Or are you suggesting Amelia should have handheld your transformation expert through basic technical verification? The real question, Richard added, is why someone presenting technical infrastructure to the board didn't bother to verify what was production versus development. That's not sabotage. That's incompetence. I pulled out my laptop. If the board would like to see our actual infrastructure metrics, I have them here. 18 months of 99.98% uptime, 60% operational cost versus industry standard, 0 security breaches, and 12 million in prevented losses through proactive system management. While working from a basement, Elena added, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Harold, would you like to explain why our most critical technical team is operating from a storage room with leaking pipes? Harold's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Victor had shrunk into his chair, his grand transformation revealed as smoke and mirrors. I think, Elena continued, we need to discuss some organizational changes. Harold, Victor, please wait outside. Amelia, stay. As they filed out, Harold red-faced, Victor deflated. I remained standing at the front of the room. Through the glass doors, I could see my team gathered in the break room, pretending to work while obviously watching the drama unfold. Now, Elena said once the door closed, let's talk about what really needs transforming at Brightforge. The board members leaned in, and I began presenting the actual data, the real innovations, the genuine value my team delivered daily despite being literally pushed underground. No fiction necessary, the truth was damning enough. The coffee shop was deliberately chosen, neutral territory, public enough to keep things professional, private enough for serious conversation. Sophie Drake was already waiting when I arrived the next morning. 2 lattes on the table and a smile that said she knew exactly why I'd agreed to meet. Basement, really? She said without preamble. That's where they've got you. News travels fast. News travels especially fast when Elena Cross calls me at 10 p.m. asking about Vertex's technical leadership structure. Sophie pushed one of the lattes toward me. She wanted to know if we had any openings at the senior director level. I nearly choked on my coffee. Elena called you. Officially? No. Unofficially? She's doing damage control. Apparently, yesterday's board meeting turned into what one member described as a masterclass in corporate self-destruction. Harold's on administrative leave pending review, and Victor Lane left the building with security escort. The satisfaction should have felt better. Instead, I just felt tired. My team is still in the basement. Not for long, I'd imagine, but that's not why you're here. Sophie leaned back, studying me. You're not someone who makes moves without thinking 10 steps ahead. So let me skip the recruitment dance and get straight to it. I want you and your entire team, Senior Director of Infrastructure, reporting directly to me with full autonomy over technical decisions. My entire team, all 7, I've done my homework, Amelia. Sarah Chen's database architecture work alone is worth the investment. Tom Martinez could revolutionize our deployment pipeline, and Linda Foster, we've been trying to poach her for 2 years. You've been trying to poach all of us. Guilty. But now I have budget approval for something bigger. She pulled out a tablet, showing me an organizational chart. We're launching a new division, Cloud Infrastructure for Financial Services. The contracts are already signed, 3 major banks, 2 investment firms. We need the best team in the industry to build it. The numbers at the bottom of the screen made me blink. That's double what Brightforge pays. For you, your team gets 60% raises, full relocation packages if needed, and equity stakes. Real equity, not the phantom stock options Harold probably promised you. Harold promised a lot of things. I'm not Harold. Sophie's expression turned serious. I've watched you build miracles with scraps for 6 years. I want to see what you can do with actual resources. Corner offices for everyone, yes, even the juniors. Latest equipment, no budget caps on necessary tools, and a training fund that doesn't require 17 forms and a prayer to access. I thought about my team. Hunched over laptops in a moldy basement, creating documentation for systems that had saved Brightforge millions while being treated like costly inconveniences. I need to talk to them first, I said. Of course. But Amelia? Sophie smiled. Elena wasn't the only one who called me. Sarah already reached out. Apparently, your whole team has been updating their resumes since Monday. They're ready to follow you anywhere. The question is, are you ready to lead them somewhere better? My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Emergency, come back now. I have to go, I said, standing. The offer's open. Sophie called after me. But not forever. I need an answer by Monday. The ride back to Brightforge felt longer than usual. When I reached the basement, I found my team clustered around Linda's laptop, their faces a mix of anger and disbelief. "What's the emergency?" Sarah turned the screen toward me. It was an internal memo from Harold, sent an hour ago despite his supposed administrative leave. Effective immediately. The infrastructure systems team is being restructured. All current positions will be reviewed for redundancy, with decisions finalized by end of week. During this transition, all system access is suspended pending security review. "He's firing us," Tom said flatly. "He's on leave but somehow still has authority to fire us." "He doesn't," I said, pulling out my phone. "This is desperation. He knows the board is investigating, so he's trying to make us the scapegoats." "Can he do that?" Jake asked. "He can try." I forwarded the memo to Elena with a single line. "Harold is exceeding his authority while on administrative leave." Her response was immediate. "Ignore it. Board meeting in 1 hour. Bring your team. Pack your personal items," I told them. "Whatever happens in the next hour, we're not coming back to this basement." They moved quickly, efficiently, the way they did everything. 7 cardboard boxes filled with personal effects, years of work reduced to what could be carried in a single trip. As we waited for the elevator, Linda spoke quietly. "Sophie Drake called me last night." "She called me too," Tom added. One by one. They all nodded. Sophie had contacted each of them individually. "She's building something special," Sarah said. "And she wants us all." The elevator arrived, and we stepped in together. 7 brilliant engineers and 1 manager who'd failed to protect them from corporate politics. But as the doors closed on that dismal basement, I made a decision. "After this meeting," I said, "we're all going out for drinks. And we're going to talk about our future, our real future. Not the one Harold or even Elena envisions, but the one we choose." "You're taking the Vertex offer," Sarah said. It wasn't a question. "I'm considering all options, but yes, Vertex is at the top of the list." "Good," Linda said firmly, "because we already decided where you go, we go, but we'd prefer if it was somewhere with windows." The elevator rose steadily, carrying us up from the basement toward whatever came next. Through the small window, I could see sunlight, actual sunlight, for the first time in days. "One condition," I said as we reached the executive floor. "We walk in there as a team. We leave as a team. No one gets left behind." "No one gets left behind," they echoed. The boardroom doors loomed ahead. Inside, a reckoning waited. But for the first time since returning from Lisbon, I felt genuinely confident. Not because I had a plan, though I did, but because I had something better. I had a team worth fighting for. And options for a future where their brilliance would be valued, not buried. We walked toward the boardroom together. 7 cardboard boxes and 8 people who refused to be relegated to the basement any longer. The boardroom atmosphere was electric when we entered. Elena sat at the head of the table, flanked by Richard Vaughn and several other board members I recognized. Harold stood in the corner, his face flushed, clearly in the middle of defending himself. Victor was nowhere to be seen. "Perfect timing," Elena said, gesturing for us to enter. Harold was just explaining how he has the authority to restructure the infrastructure team while on administrative leave. "It's preventive action," Harold stammered. "After yesterday's sabotage." "You mean yesterday's revelation that you hired a fraud?" Richard interrupted. "We've spent the morning reviewing Victor Lane's previous employers. Did you know TechCorp is currently suing him for damages? Or that Pinnacle Systems credits him as the primary cause of their bankruptcy?" Harold's face went from red to white. His credentials were impressive. "His credentials were fabricated," Elena said coldly. "Which you would have known if you'd done basic due diligence instead of being dazzled by buzzwords and a smooth pitch." She turned to me. "Amelia, I asked you to bring your team for a reason. The board has questions about our actual technical infrastructure, and we want to hear from the people who built it. For the next 40 minutes, My team presented, not fiction, not inflated metrics, but the real work, the elegant solutions, the prevented disasters, the innovations that had kept Brightforge competitive in a brutal market. Sarah explained the database architecture that processed transactions 40% faster than industry standard. Tom detailed the deployment pipeline that had reduced downtime to nearly zero. Linda walked through the security protocols that had prevented 3 major breach attempts. The board listened intently, asking technical questions that my team answered with the confidence of people who actually knew their craft. Harold shrank further with each slide, realizing perhaps for the first time what he'd almost thrown away. "I have one last question," Elena said when we finished. "What would it take to keep you here?" The room went silent. My team looked at me, and I saw Sarah give the slightest nod. "Respect," I said simply. "Appropriate workspace, resources to do our jobs properly, and leadership that values actual expertise over empty promises." "Harold's position is under review," Elena said carefully. "The board is considering significant structural changes." "That's good to hear," I replied. "But my team has been patient long enough. We've been disrespected, undervalued, and literally shoved into a basement. While I appreciate that the board is now paying attention, it shouldn't have taken a disaster to make our value visible." "What are you saying?" Richard asked, though his expression suggested he already knew. "I'm saying we've received an offer from Vertex Innovations. All of us. As a team. With the resources and respect we deserve." Harold made a choking sound. "You can't. Your contracts, non-competes." "Our contracts expired 3 months ago," I said calmly. "You never renewed them because, as you told me at the time, it was just paperwork that could wait. The non-competes are non-existent." Elena's expression was unreadable. "When do they need an answer?" "Monday." "And if the board made you a counteroffer, match the salary, the resources, the autonomy?" I looked at my team. Each face told the same story. Trust broken, patience exhausted. "Then we'd listen," I said. "But it would need to be more than promises. We'd need guarantees, written into contracts, with specific accountability measures." "You want Harold gone," Elena said bluntly. "I want leadership that understands the difference between real value and smoke and mirrors. Whether that includes Harold is the board's decision." Elena stood. "Give us 24 hours. The board will meet tonight and provide a formal response tomorrow." 24 hours, I agreed. As we filed out, Harold tried to intercept me. "Amelia, this is a misunderstanding. We can work this out." "We could have," I said, stepping around him. 3 days ago, you could have come to the basement, seen the conditions, and fixed it. 2 days ago, you could have verified Victor's credentials. Yesterday, you could have stood up for the team that's kept this company running, but you didn't. And now it's too late for informal fixes." Sophie Drake was waiting in the lobby, leaning against a pillar with casual confidence that suggested she knew exactly how the meeting had gone. "Elena called you," I said. It wasn't a question. She wanted to know if my offer was real. I assured her it was. I also told her that I've already started processing the paperwork. "Your team starts in 2 weeks, if you say yes." My team gathered around us, still carrying their cardboard boxes. "The board wants 24 hours to counter," I told Sophie. "Of course they do," she smiled. "They just realize they're about to lose the people who actually run this place." "But Amelia, we both know what their counter will be. Just enough to make you hesitate, not enough to make real change." "Maybe." Sophie handed me a folder. "The official offer letters. Individual copies for everyone. Look them over tonight. Whatever the board offers tomorrow, compare it to this. And ask yourself, where will your team thrive, not just survive?" As she walked away, Tom whistled low. "She's not playing around." "Neither are we," I said. "Tonight, we review everything. Tomorrow, we make a decision. Together." We left through the main entrance, walking past the executive parking spaces where Harold's BMW sat with a fresh parking ticket. Apparently, Even parking enforcement had heard about his administrative leave. You know what the really pathetic part is? Sarah said as we reached the street. If they'd just left us alone to do our work, we would have stayed forever. We didn't need corner offices or fancy titles. We just needed to not be treated like furniture they could shove in storage. I thought about the basement, about the dripping pipe and flickering lights, about Victor Lane sitting at my grandfather's desk arranging his fake certificates. Well, I said, they made their choice. Tomorrow, we make ours. The sun was setting, painting the city in shades of gold and amber. Somewhere in the building behind us, the board was probably in emergency session, trying to figure out how to keep the people they'd just spent a week showing they didn't value. But we weren't looking back anymore. We were looking forward, toward windows and respect, and a future where our worth wouldn't need to be proven through elaborate revenge. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying those who wronged you. It's simply choosing to thrive without them. The next morning arrived gray and drizzly, fitting weather for what would likely be my last day at Brightforge. I'd spent the night reviewing Vertex's contracts with my team over Chinese takeout and beer, marking up provisions and benefits with highlighters until the documents looked like rainbow manuscripts. Elena had scheduled our meeting for 10 a.m. I arrived at 9:45 to find the executive floor in chaos. Harold's office, Victor's brief office, my former office, was being cleared out. Maintenance staff carried boxes while security supervised. Quite a morning, Elena said, appearing beside me. The board met until 3 a.m. Harold submitted his resignation at midnight, effective immediately. Resigned or was resigned. Does it matter? She gestured toward the conference room. Shall we? The boardroom held fewer people this time. Elena, Richard Vaughn, and 2 other board members I recognized as the company's largest shareholders. A stack of documents sat at the center of the table. Let's skip the pleasantries, Elena began. We know what Vertex offered. Sophie Drake was surprisingly transparent when I called her professional courtesy. She said, we're prepared to match the salary offers and exceed them by 15%. Richard slid a document across the table. We're also proposing a new organizational structure. The infrastructure systems team would become its own division, reporting directly to the CTO position, which would be you, Amelia. CTO, the position I'd been working toward for 6 years. The basement, I asked, is being converted back to storage, effective immediately. We've allocated the entire 9th floor for your division. Corner offices, latest equipment, dedicated server room. Harold? Gone. His entire leadership team is under review. Victor Lane is facing potential legal action for misrepresentation. Another document slid across. Equity packages for your entire team. Real equity vested over 3 years, with acceleration clauses for performance metrics that your team has already been exceeding. It was everything I'd wanted, everything we'd deserved from the beginning. I need to discuss this with my team, I said. They're waiting in the 9th floor conference room, Elena said. We took the liberty of having their belongings moved from the basement this morning. The 9th floor was everything the basement wasn't. Walls of windows, natural light, clean air that didn't smell of mold and desperation. My team stood in the main conference room, looking at the space with expressions of careful neutrality. I laid out both offers side by side. Brightforge's counteroffer and Vertex's original proposal. Then I sat back and let them process. They're scared, Tom said finally. This is panic mode. Maybe, I agreed. Or maybe they finally see what they almost lost. But will it last? Linda asked. What happens in 6 months when the crisis passes and some new Harold decides we're too expensive again? Sarah was examining the equity documents. These acceleration clauses are interesting. If we hit our current performance metrics, we'd be fully vested in 18 months instead of 3 years. That's a lot of money to walk away from, Jake noted. It's also a golden handcuff, I pointed out, designed to keep us here. We spent an hour dissecting every angle, every provision, every possibility. The team was split, half leaning toward the security of staying with improved conditions, half excited by the fresh start Vertex offered. There's one thing we haven't discussed, I said finally. Trust. Can we trust Brightforge after everything that's happened? The room went quiet. I keep thinking about the basement, Tom said slowly. Not just that they put us there, but that it took a disaster to get us out. What happens next time someone like Victor shows up with a good pitch? They're offering contracts with termination penalties, I pointed out. If they try to demote or relocate us without cause, they pay out the full equity package immediately. That's protection, Sarah admitted. Real protection. My phone buzzed. Sophie Drake. Heard about Brightforge's counter. Impressive. But I'm willing to add something they can't. A no politics guarantee. Your team works on tech, period. No corporate games, no transformation consultants, no basement. Ever. I showed the message to the team. We need to vote, I said. Whatever we decide together. All in favor of staying at Brightforge? 3 hands rose. Sarah, Jake, and surprisingly, Linda. All in favor of Vertex? 4 hands, Tom and 3 of our junior engineers who'd been quiet until now. Everyone looked at me. The tie-breaking vote. I thought about 6 years of building something from nothing. About the battles fought and won. About the basement and the disrespect and the assumption that we'd always just endure it. Then I thought about Sophie's words. Where will your team thrive, not just survive? I need to make a call, I said, stepping out of the room. Elena answered on the first ring. Amelia? One question, I said. If we stay, what guarantees do we have that in a year or 2 years? Another herald won't undo everything you're promising today. A pause. The board has approved a new governance structure. Technical decisions would require CTO approval, your approval. No one could relocate, restructure, or otherwise interfere with your division without your consent. Put it in writing, not just in my contract, but in the corporate bylaws. Make it structural, not personal. That's unprecedented. So is putting your best engineering team in a basement. Unprecedented times call for unprecedented measures. Another pause, longer this time. I'll need board approval. You have 1 hour. After that, we're going to Vertex. I hung up and returned to the conference room. My team was debating intensely, but stopped when I entered. I've given them 1 hour to make the protection structural, not just contractual, I announced. If they do it, I vote to stay and rebuild this place properly. If they don't, we walk. Sarah smiled. Already thinking like a CTO? Not yet, I said. Right now, I'm just thinking like someone who refuses to let her team end up in another basement. We waited, 7 engineers and 1 almost CTO, watching the clock and occasionally checking the window view we'd been denied for a week. At 58 minutes, Elena walked in personally, followed by Richard Vaughn and the company's legal counsel. The board voted, she said, placing a freshly printed document on the table. Unanimous approval. The Infrastructure Systems Division's autonomy is now part of Brightforge's corporate bylaws. It would take a 75% shareholder vote to change it. I read through the provisions carefully. It was everything I'd asked for, and more. Well, Elena asked, do we have a deal? I looked at my team. One by one, they nodded. We have a deal, I said, on one condition. Elena's eye twitched. Which is? Sophie Drake gets a finder's fee for forcing you to see our value. Make a donation to her chosen charity. Something substantial. Richard Vaughn actually laughed. Done. Anything else? Yes, I said, standing. We want Victor's certificates removed from my office wall, today. Already done, Elena said. We've also had your grandfather's desk restored and returned. For the first time in a week, I felt the anger truly start to fade. Not because they'd suffered, though Harold's resignation and Victor's disgrace didn't hurt, but because we'd won something more valuable than revenge. We'd won respect. And more importantly, we'd won it together. The official transition happened on a Monday, exactly 1 week after I'd returned from Lisbon to find my team banished to the basement. The 9th floor had been transformed over the weekend. Not just offices, but a proper technical workspace with server rooms, testing labs, and yes, windows. Floor-to-ceiling windows that flooded everything with natural light. I stood in my new office, formerly Harold's before his hasty departure, watching my team settle into their spaces. Sarah had claimed the corner spot with the best morning light. Tom had already set up 3 monitors and what appeared to be a small hydroponic garden. Linda was organizing her desk with military precision, while Jake tested the coffee machine we'd specifically requested, a proper espresso setup, not the ancient drip machine from the basement. Ms. Rowe? A young woman appeared at my door. I'm Jessica, from HR. I have the final paperwork for the new hires you requested. Send them in, I said. Over the next hour, I interviewed 12 engineers who'd applied to join our expanded division. Word had gotten out about our newfound autonomy and resources, and suddenly everyone wanted to work for the team that had survived the basement and emerged stronger. Elena stopped by that afternoon, ostensibly to check on the transition, but really, I suspected, to make sure we were actually staying. Sophie Drake called this morning, she said, settling into one of my new chairs. She congratulated us on keeping you. Then she poached 2 of Harold's former direct reports. Sophie doesn't waste opportunities, I said. Neither do you. Elena gazed out at the city view. The board wants you to present at the quarterly shareholders meeting, the real infrastructure review this time. No quantum neural networks? Please, no. She actually shuddered. Richard Vaughn is still using that as a cautionary tale at every tech conference he attends. A knock interrupted us. Tom stood in the doorway, laptop in hand. Boss, you need to see this. He turned the screen toward us. It was a LinkedIn post from Victor Lane. Excited to announce my new role as Chief Transformation Officer at Meridian Corp, ready to revolutionize their technological landscape. Elena groaned. Should we warn them? No, I said, thinking of some other engineering team that might soon find themselves in a basement. But maybe we should reach out to their technical staff, professional networking, building industry relationships. You're going to poach them when Victor inevitably destroys everything, Elena said. It wasn't a question. I'm going to make sure talented people know they have options. What they do with that information is their choice. Elena stood to leave, then paused. The board wanted me to ask, are you happy with the resolution? Is your team? I looked through my office window at my team, now spread across a floor that respected their worth. Jake was explaining something animatedly to the new hires. Sarah was architecting something complex on her whiteboard. Linda was already deep in code, probably improving something that didn't technically need improving, but would run better anyway. We're not happy about what happened, I said honestly, but we're satisfied with how it ended, and we're excited about what comes next. Good enough, Elena said. By the way, your first board meeting as CTO is Thursday. Try not to destroy anyone too thoroughly. After she left, I called Sophie Drake. Congratulations on the new position, she said immediately. CTO suits you. Thank you for the pressure. We needed that competing offer to make this happen. Happy to help. Besides, I got 2 excellent senior managers out of Harold's exodus. Win-win. The offer, was it real? Would you really have taken all of us? In a heartbeat, Sophie said without hesitation. The offer stands, by the way, not to poach, just so you know. If Brightforge ever forgets your value again, Vertex's door is always open. Noted and appreciated. Amelia? One more thing. That basement week, don't forget how it felt. Use it. When you're CTO, when you're making decisions about other teams, remember what it was like to be undervalued. Make sure it doesn't happen on your watch. That evening, I gathered my team for an impromptu celebration. We commandeered the executive conference room, the same one where Victor had crashed and burned, and ordered from the expensive sushi place that Harold had always said was not in the departmental budget. A toast, I said, raising my sake cup, to basements that couldn't hold us, to executives who underestimated us, and to the sweet taste of vindication served at exactly the right temperature. To Amelia, Sarah countered, who played the long game while we were ready to burn it all down. To the quantum neural network load balancer, Tom added with a grin, may it rest in fictional peace. We drank. We laughed. We shared war stories from the basement week that were already becoming legend. The junior engineers listened wide-eyed as Linda described the bucket that caught the pipe drips, which Jake had named Harold Jr., by day 3. As the evening wound down and the team began to leave, Sarah lingered. You know we would have followed you to Vertex, she said. No hesitation. I know. So why stay? I thought about it, looking out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the darkness. Because running away would have been survival. Staying and taking control, that's victory. And the revenge, did you get enough? I smiled, thinking about Harold's resignation, Victor's disgrace, and our emergence from the basement to the C-suite. Revenge was never the point, it was just the motivation. The point was proving that talent and hard work matter more than politics and empty promises. We didn't just survive their worst treatment, we turned it into our greatest triumph. Sarah nodded and headed for the door, then turned back. You know what the best part is? They'll never underestimate an engineering team again. Every time some executive thinks about shoving technical staff into a corner, they'll remember what happened here. After everyone left, I stood alone in my new office, looking at the city spread below. Somewhere out there, Victor Lane was probably preparing his transformation presentation for Meridian Corp. Harold was updating his resume. And in this building, 9 floors up from a basement that now held only bad memories, my team was finally where they belonged. I pulled out my phone and texted Sophie. Thank you for being the catalyst. Dinner next week to compare notes on Harold's former reports. Her response was immediate. Already in my calendar. And Amelia, welcome to the C-suite. You've earned it. We all had, not through political maneuvering or impressive credentials, but through competence, loyalty, and the kind of strategic thinking that turns a basement exile into a boardroom victory. The janitor knocked, ready to clean the office. As I gathered my things, he said. Heard about what happened. Maintenance has been talking about it all week. That basement was a disgrace. Not anymore, I said. It's going back to storing old equipment where it belongs. And you're all up here now. We're exactly where we should be. As the elevator descended, I thought about the journey from basement to the 9th floor. Not just the physical distance, but everything it represented. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying those who wronged you. It's building something so undeniably excellent that their mistakes become monuments to their own inadequacy. The elevator opened to the lobby, and I walked out into the evening air. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, board meetings, technical decisions that would shape the company's future. But tonight, I simply savored the victory. My team was safe, valued, and positioned to thrive. Harold was gone. Victor was someone else's problem. And I was CTO of a major corporation with the power to ensure no engineering team would ever be relegated to a basement on my watch. Revenge, as it turned out, was just the beginning. The real satisfaction came from what we built from its ashes. Thank you for listening to this story of corporate revenge and ultimate triumph. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If you enjoyed this tale of justice served cold from a basement office, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Amelia's position? Let me know in the comments.